Hello, and welcome to another marvelous video. We know that there would be no Mortal Kombat, no King of Fighters, no Tekken, without a particular game that defined the fighting genre. Yes, you guessed right, we're talking about Street Fighter. With Street Fighter 6 scheduled to be released in 2023, it will be interesting to know the backstory of one of the most famous characters of said franchise. Many Street Fighter characters have become so iconic that even those who do not play the game recognize them. One of the most recognizable video game characters is Ryu from Street Fighter. He has made countless film, television, comic book, and even toy appearances. Ryu has appeared in multiple other Capcom games, including Mega Man, Smash Bros, Asura's Wrath, and others. Even the superheroes and villains from Marvel Comics have faced off against this legendary warrior. What has Ryu accomplished to merit all of this acclaim? He isn't particularly well known as a fighting game character for his personality or rich past. He hasn't often spoken in-game, and the Street Fighter series endings usually consist of a few pages of text. Although Ryu is likely the least intriguing character in Street Fighter 2, he is the one who attained the most popularity with the general public. How did that come to happen? Stick with us to find out. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who was the inspiration behind the character of Ryu? The inspiration for many Street Fighter series characters comes from actual people. Balrog definitely takes inspiration from Mike Tyson, which is why the name had to be altered after all the tinkering. Fei Long would be like Bruce Lee if Bruce Lee could ignite his leg while kicking. The purpose of Alex and Hugo is to recreate Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, including the epic stare down from WrestleMania 3. Two distinct individuals, one genuine and one made up, served as inspiration for Ryu. The first is Matsutatsu Oyama, a renowned Korean karate teacher. Like Ryu, he would vanish for extended periods of time so that he could practice by himself in the mountain. He would tour Japan most of his life, performing demos at various dojos and competing in matches. The lead character in the manga series, Karate Baka Ichidai, served as another source of inspiration for Ryu. Ryu history explored. Ryu was an orphan as a child and had no recollection of his parents. Gouken adopts and raises him in a private dojo, and he is severely trained in Gouken's martial arts technique. A few years later, Gouken begins teaching Ryu at the dojo with his closest friend's son, Ken Masters. Ryu and Ken become fast friends and practice together daily. To this day, Ryu considers Gouken to be his father and Ken to be his greatest friend and surrogate brother. Ryu quits the dojo after he reaches the age of 23, believing that his training is over. Ryu wants to put his martial arts talents to the test and battle the finest warriors in the world. Gouken thought Ryu was ready to tour the world at the age of 23 to test and refine his martial talents against the top fighters from across the world. After Ryu and Ken had finished their training, Ken departed to the United States and Ryu traveled to Thailand by himself to confront Sagat, the Emperor of Muay Thai, which is regarded as the most lethal martial art. In Street Fighter, when Ryu first arrived in Thailand, he realized he couldn't just confront Sagat as an unproven fighter, so Ryu devised a strategy to force Sagat to accept his challenge. He felt that by dominating several Muay Thai opponents, Sagat would ultimately hear about it. If successful, Sagat would come out to protect Muay Thai's reputation. Sagat heard Ryu, and his fighting spirit burnt after he defeated 20 Muay Thai practitioners and yelled at the fighters about how it is embarrassing to let a stranger damage Muay Thai's reputation. He assured Ryu that they would fight once he demonstrated authentic Muay Thai, but Ryu uses an almost deadly Shoryuken attack to beat Sagat, leaving a huge scar on his chest. Sagat vowed revenge on Ryu after regaining consciousness and realizing what had transpired. In the Street Fighter Alpha series, after leaving Sagat behind, Ryu trains for several months while traveling to different locations and contemplating the purpose of everything in life. Sagat was formerly regarded as the strongest man in the world. Therefore, Ryu's victory against him would make him the strongest. This would signify that Ryu had accomplished the primary goal of his life. Ryu persisted in his training anyway, picking up new skills along the way since he refused to accept that he had already attained his objectives so quickly. On the remote island of Gokwento, Ryu runs across Akuma and defeats him. However, Akuma was merely merely trying to test Ryu and believe that Ryu possessed similar abilities to his own. He then continues to teach Ryu about the Satsui no Hado, a force that consumes those who practice their common fighting methods and compels them to succeed, even if it means murdering their rival. The island is subsequently destroyed by Akuma using his fist, leaving Ryu adrift. After leaving the island, Ken eventually comes upon Ryu. He inquires what it entails to be a real fighter and questions if he ought to utilize the same fist he employed to defeat Sagat or the one that murderer Akuma uses. In an effort to wake him up, Ken confronts Ryu when he returns to his poor habit of overanalyzing situations. Ken discovers, after overcoming Ryu, that he had been terribly tormented ever since his previous triumph against Sagat. He hands Ryu his iconic red headband and tells him to use it to remember their struggle and to keep fighting to discover the solution anytime he feels lost. They part ways as Ryu accepts the headband with joy. Soon, Sakura, one of his followers, approaches and declares her wish to train with him. Ryu responds that he still has a lot to learn for himself, but for the time being, he lets Sakura snap a photo of him. Sagat, who is looking for a grudge bout, eventually finds Ryu. Ryu points out that Sagat hasn't completely healed from their previous fight, but Sagat perseveres. Ryu lets Sagat win rather than doing any more harm, and Sagat leaves. Only afterward, in retrospect, does Sagat realize that Ryu resisted, promising to fight him again. After that, we will see Ryu still worried about what Akuma told him, which is exacerbated by his encounter with Rose, who has extensive links to M. Bison. She informs him that he will not be able to overpower him until he battles Bison at the expense of his soul. When Ryu faces Bison, he is defeated after an intense battle. After the fight, Ryu is taken hostage by Bison, who starts brainwashing him while stating that Bison's own psycho power is identical to the terrible energy Ryu is trying to avoid using, the Satsui no Hado. This encounter is interrupted by the arrival of Sagat, Ken, and Sakura, who have all followed Ryu for different reasons. While Ken and Sakura distract Bison, Sagat confronts Ryu, instantly recognizing the effects of Bison's brainwashing. Ryu comes back to his wits at Sagat's prodding and confronts and defeats Bison, temporarily destroying him. After that, we see Ryu in the Street Fighter II series. Ryu enters the World Warrior competition to put his talents to the test, and he easily defeats several of the new fighters. Shadaloo, unbeknownst to Ryu, has created the competition with the express purpose of reclaiming his corpse. Ryu writes Ken a letter that rekindles his fighting spirit. It is uncertain how far Ryu advanced in the tournament. Only the English translation of Street Fighter Eternal Challenge implies that he may have lost against Ken. On the other hand, Ken's vow to Eliza does not appear in any other source or the original text of Eternal Challenge. Ryu defeated Ken and M. Bison according to Street Fighter II Complete File. Ryu appears in Street Fighter IV Aftermath, assisting Ken, Guile, Cammy, and Chun-Li in defeating Bison. On the other hand, Bison declined Guile's offer to submit to the military before releasing all of his psycho power to commit suicide. The animation's canon status is uncertain because Capcom has not addressed it in other media. For the 30th anniversary collection, Capcom republished the All About Street Fighter volumes that describe Akuma beating M. Bison. Capcom returns to Akuma murdering M. Bison in Street Fighter V, with Akuma's Street Fighter II ending being the only one that displays M. Bison being slain. In his non-canon conclusion, Ryu quits the competition shortly after defeating Bison and returns to his master's grave to talk about his triumph and his interactions with the other combatants. Ryu then declares that the final battle awaits him and exits, claiming that the struggle is everything. Ryu resumed his travels after the World Warrior contest and ended up in an isolated desert where he practiced. Ryu recalls his confrontation with Akuma, during which Akuma urged him to give in to the Dark Hado or else he would murder him. Ryu then leaves the desert for a pub where he encounters a motorcyclist. The biker then tells him about an American martial arts champion who destroyed his family. Ryu goes to the champion's residence believing it to be Ken, but is ambushed by Sea Viper. Cammy, a Delta Red agent, then attempts to attack Sea Viper. However, Cammy was no match for Viper, and Viper tortures Cammy, after which the Dark Hado takes over Ryu and he battles Sea Viper, easily defeating her. Fortunately for Viper, she gets to flee the possessed Ryu. Ryu becomes enraged and slaughters several Sin scientists who watch the battle until Guile, Sakura, Chun-Li, and Ken arrive arrive to save Ryu and assist Kami. Sakura would then detain the possessed Ryu while Ken called the hospital for assistance with Kami. Ryu would eventually regain his consciousness and understand what he had done. Ryu knows he is being targeted by Sin and its commander Seth after being transported to Ken's house. Ryu then joins Guile's plot to enter Seth's cruise ship and imprison him, knowing that Seth would be waiting for him. After arriving at the base, Ryu and Ken fight several Sin goons before encountering Seth himself. Ryu and Seth then fight, with Seth handily overwhelming Ryu and teaching him his perverted power philosophy. Ryu then acknowledges that he has never known what power is and understands Seth's ideology before admitting that the ability described by Seth is not what he seeks. Unimpressed, Seth proceeds to beat up Ryu when Ryu wakes up a new power and nearly kills Seth with it. Ryu then collapses under the influence of this power, which he detects in Ken. A few days later, Ryu and Ken split ways, with Ryu promising to meet again. Next, Ryu enters the Street Fighter IV competition to polish his abilities and meet up with Ken again for a rematch. He meets Sakura on the way and pushes her to train harder. He also meets Sagat, and the two finally have their long-awaited rematch, the outcome of which is unknown. Ryu confronts Seth in the finals and beats him within the Sin headquarters. The structure collapses around them during and after their combat. Ryu activates the Satsui no Hado on the Bleach machine, a weapon of mass devastation created by Sin that harnesses the energy in the human body. At this time, Sakura was looking for Ryu and came across him battling the machine. A pulse of electricity from the Bleach machine then knocks her into a wall. Ryu saves Sakura and destroys the machine with a Shoryuken. Following that, the two depart the Sin headquarters together. Ryu competed in the third World Warrior event many years later. During this tournament, his most memorable bout happens against Hugo, who is able to survive his Shin Shoryuken and continue battling. Following the struggle, he briefly serves as Hugo's pro wrestling tag team partner before moving on. Ryu also confronts Alex and quickly beats him. Ryu urges the novice wrestler to continue developing his skills against more experienced opponents. Alex is inspired by Ryu's ability and vows to become stronger. Ryu continues his journey and ultimately encounters the hermit, Oro. After a battle, Oro assists Ryu in his training, while Ryu is unaware of the hermit's presence. In the Street Fighter V series, we see, in his dream, Ryu battles his evil ego, convincing him that the ability to murder will make him stronger, which Ryu finally refuses. During the incident, Gouken is engaged in a sparring bout. Ryu charges into the Satsui no Hado, attempting to hit his master with a single Hadouken. It goes off in a flash of light. Ryu awakens from his dream and Gouken informs him that the Satsui no Hado nearly consumed him. Rashid and Azam track down Ryu, who introduces himself as a world-traveling hero. Rashid is questioned by Gouken as to why he has come to see Ryu. Rashid says he wants to challenge Ryu in a match to see how strong he is. Ryu does not fight immediately because he is concerned about the Satsui no Hado, which confuses Rashid and prompts Gouken to question him about it, citing Ryu's quote, "The answer lies in the heart of battle." Ryu ultimately gets up and spars with Rashid, eventually winning. Rashid learns about himself as a result of the conflict. He leaves after thanking Ryu for the lesson. Ryu chooses to go as well to better comprehend his abilities. Gouken directs Ryu to meet with Ken, who has been worried about him. In Brazil, Ryu and Ken eventually meet, where Ken is told by Gouken about Ryu's difficulties with the Satsui no Hado, and believes that a suitable match can remedy the problem. So they fight. Ryu is still concerned about the Satsui no Hado. Ken tells Ryu that if he succumbs to the evil side, he will take him down and stop him. Ken advises Ryu to simply relax and attack. After that, Ryu travels to China only to be assaulted by a Shadaloo soldier. Nash enters and kills the soldier. Nash expected to see Ryu, which reminded him of Satsui no Hado. Nash claims they must fight for him to comprehend the power and its limitations. The battle is eventually called a draw. Nash is taken aback by the power, which exceeds his expectations. Ryu informs Nash that he fights with the power and tries to repress it, and is determined not to let it take over, which Nash appreciates. Nash exits after Ryu praises him after the battle. In Street Fighter V, A Shadow Falls, Ryu meets with Dalsim, who is training Mahesh, and tells him that he is still struggling with the Satsui no Hado and needs assistance. They decide to fight each other. Dhalsim tells him after the spar that suppressing the power might very well ultimately lead to the power consuming him. He tells him that he must confront and defeat Hado. Necalli descends from above seeking the souls of fighters. While Dhalsim protects Mahesh, Ryu battles Necalli. Necalli dominates Ryu, almost activating his dark power. Dhalsim deflects Ryu's attack, declaring that he would not allow the Hado to possess him. Dhalsim deflects Necalli. Ryu observes a black moon crossing the sky and covering the light, which reminds him of M. Bison. Necalli ultimately dissolves away for a while. Dhalsim tells him about Necalli, an ancient entity that absorbs warrior souls and only appears when many soldiers are required in a crisis. Ryu comes to the conclusion that the planet is in trouble as a result of the Black Moons. In the end, Ryu joins Ken, Chun-Li, Karen, and Shadaloo for their last assault. Ryu ultimately approaches Bison, who is anxious to face him, and says that his power is to push forward and that he is prepared to battle him, as Chun-Li beats Fang while saving Li Fen. When Ryu finally hits Bison with a Hadouken loaded with the power of nothingness, it suggests that Ryu has mastered the power and sublimated the Satsui no Hado. This comes after a protracted conflict in which Bison showed no signs of giving up. The lunatic is vanquished as Bison's body starts to disintegrate before vanishing in a flash of light. Ryu is meditating after the event when Ken pays him a second visit. He challenges him to a friendly sparring match, telling Ryu to prove that he has already discovered his answer. Ryu defeats Ken, despite Ken knocking off Ryu's red headband. Ryu realizes as it falls to the ground that he has already found the answer to his true strength. Ken is pleased to see how much his friend has matured, and Ryu adds that he still needs his headband for the duel. Later, the two are seen exchanging cordial fist bumps. Ryu in Street Fighter II, the animated movie, 1994. Street Fighter II, the animated movie, is a 1994 anime adaptation of Kenichi Ima's Street Fighter II fighting game, directed by Gisaburo Sugi and animated by Group TAC. Ryu is the main character and the one around which numerous others revolve, including Sagat, Guile, and Bison. Bison orders a worldwide manhunt for Ryu after he scars and kills Sagat in the movie's opening scene in an effort to brainwash him into joining Shadaloo, here known as Shadow Law. He can't find Ryu since he's been traveling the world and suppressing his strength, making Bison's monitor cyborgs unable to identify him. Throughout the film, Ryu encounters various warriors, including Fei Long and E Honda. Bison finally kidnaps and brainwashes Ken in place of Ryu. This causes Guile and Interpol to apprehend Ryu before Bison can, but Bison pursues them and forces Ken on Ryu, who refuses to fight his mind-controlled buddy. Ken manages to release himself from Bison's mind control, and the two eventually collaborate to defeat Bison. In the end, Ryu and Ken part ways once more as Ryu begins his adventure afresh. However, he is ambushed from behind by a massive truck, the driver of which is revealed to be Bison, who has survived the conflict. The film concludes with Ryu leaping towards the truck to battle Bison again. In the Japanese original, he was voiced by Kijiro Shimizu, while in the English dub, he was portrayed by Skip Stelrecht. What makes Ryu so strong? Despite its differences with the real-life martial art, Ryu's fighting style is known as Shotokan. On the other hand, his regular attacks appear to mirror the martial art in specific ways, particularly with some parts of Hapkido via the detailed titles of his normals in most Japanese sources. His interpretation of the unidentified Ana Satsuken technique, along with his own understanding of Shotokan, concentrates on powerful single strikes that generally knock the opponent down and is focused on his signature Hadouken. Ryu appears in every Street Fighter game as the series' fundamental character, an all-around fighter with an intuitive assortment of punches and kicks and basic special techniques that are simple to learn. Though his simplicity provides a lot of attacking mobility, it severely limits his combo capabilities, especially compared to characters like Ken. This makes him somewhat predictable versus more skilled players. Ryu's fighting technique is also said to be comparable to how he operates in the games. A consistent tool set that varies each time very slightly. It's in Ryu's habit to adhere to the fundamentals, playing to the more consistent methods he's perfected over the years, and he frequently attempts to master them while altering them to small extents. Ryu's primary special moves include the Hadouken, also known as the Fireball, the Shoryuken, or Dragon Punch, and the Tatsumaki Senpukyaku, also known as the Hurricane Kick. Ryu is able to perform the Tatsumaki Senpukyaku in the air in later versions of Street Fighter II, and he acquires the ability to utilize a more powerful Hadouken that is an actual fireball. He uses a strategy called the Hado no Kame in the Alpha series, which is a fake Hadouken posture meant to trick the opponent. Ryu acquires the Jodan Sukutogeri in the Street Fighter III series, a strong sidekick that shoves opponents away with enormous force. Many of Ryu's super combos are enhanced versions of his standard techniques. His signature Shinku Hadouken is a 5-hit Hadouken and the series' first super combo. The Shin Shoryuken is a powerful close-range uppercut, while the Shinku Tatsumaki Senpukyaku is a multi-hitting kick. Marvelous appearances of Ryu in other media. In Street Fighter Assassin's Fist, Ryu appears with Ken and Gouken. The character is portrayed by Mike Moh. Ryu was taken to Gouken to be nurtured after being discovered as a small child roaming aimlessly in the woods close to his dojo. Ryu, who is often emotionally numb due to whatever horrific event drove him to roam the forest, suddenly taps into the Satsui no Hado during a fight with Ken. Gouken sends both pupils out to explore the globe to prevent Akuma from discovering Ryu. In the Western animated series Street Fighter, his plot is essentially a mashup of the two tales from the live-action movie and the video games. Ryu, who was once more given the last name Hoshi and was replaced as the primary character by Guile, is still a con man, much like Ken, but he is still committed to his training. In contrast to the movie, Ryu and Sagat are rivals. In the Fei Long episode, Ryu's cousin Sachi and her buddy are kept hostage by Bison until Guile and his team come to their aid. In Street Fighter II, the animated movie, when Ryu was young, he trained with his close buddy Ken, saving him when Ken was falling into a hole. After their training, Ryu bade Ken farewell before departing to become a master of the Ant Satsuken. A few years later, Ryu and Sagat engage in combat on a stormy dark night while being observed by a Shadaloo drone. Sagat overpowered Ryu as they looked on equal footing and moved in for the kill. Ryu built up and launched a devastating Shoryuken, which caught Sagat in mid-air and knocked him out, leaving him scarred. Then, using a Hadouken, Ryu ultimately beat Sagat. After the fight, Ryu attends a tournament in Hong Kong where everyone bothers him for no apparent reason. He is coerced into the tournament ring, where he promptly headbutts his arrogant opponent to victory. This was enough to amaze one of the spectators, Fei Long, who entered the arena to test Ryu. After Ryu's victory, Fei Long told him about the terrorist organization Shadaloo and the man who had just joined them, Sagat. As Ryu makes his way to India, he stops to witness a bout between Dhalsim and E. Honda while reflecting on Sagat's fall from glory. When Ryu suddenly felt some mysterious strength emanating from him, Honda was able to gain the upper hand since Ryu was distracted. Dhalsim, who is still eager to discover Ryu's power, loses interest in the fight, but eventually gives up. A little girl accidentally bumped into Ryu as he was leaving. He picked up the milk bottle, apologized, and handed her some money from his bag. However, when the girl comes back and attempts to give him his change, she is ambushed by other thugs, which forces Ryu to strike back and take them out. A cop notifies Ryu that the criminals were Shadaloo members while they were being captured. E. Honda claims half of the money after Ryu allows the girl, who is now in better shape, to retain the change. Ryu is then given the opportunity to train with E. Honda. While the two are in Thailand for training, Guile arrives by helicopter to meet them and informs them that Bison has abducted Ken. At this point, the genius of Shadaloo, who has been following them all along in his aircraft, shows up with a brainwashed Ken. When Ryu is attacked by his friend-turned-enemy, he chooses not to defend himself, prompting Ken to defend himself against the power of M. Bison. When Bison notices this, he teleports in front of Ken and throws him over the mountain's edge. Then, Bison obstructs Ryu's attempt to save Ken by disparaging his morality and compassion, and saying that Ken might not even be alive. When Ryu gets enraged and attacks, Bison tries to convince him to join Shadaloo so the dictator can use his strength to rule the world, but Ryu adamantly rejects him. Unexpectedly, Ken makes a surprise appearance and teams up with Ryu to face Bison. The two are able to weaken Bison and beat him with a combined Hadouken, turning him into a sphere of psycho power that subsequently explodes after being struck by his Shadaloo aircraft. Later, as Ryu prepares to depart for another adventure, he bids Ken farewell once again when Bison unexpectedly reappears and tries to run him down with a truck. In Street Fighter Alpha, the animation, which is a spin-off of the video game subseries of the same name, Ryu is in the city fighting off a few agents working for Shadaloo, who were committing crimes for Sadler, attracting the attention of an Interpol agent, Chun-Li, who does some background research and realizes that Ryu is the fighter who defied the agents working for Shadaloo. And in Street Fighter Alpha Generations, when Ryu arrives in Japan to visit the dojo where he was raised, a woman tending to some plants stops him. He responds that he would pay his respects to his master when she inquires about his whereabouts. He dreams of Akuma as he recalls how the dojo has changed. Ryu assumes a combative stance, believing Akuma had come to attack him. Later, a monk tested him to see how well he could fight. In the end, Ryu is defeated by the monk, who is impressed with him and asks him to sup at his house. He eventually ran upon Sakura, who had been seeking him. When Ryu was invited to perform a bout with Sakura, he agreed, intending to get better. Sakura praised him for it after the match. The monk gives Ryu directions to find Akuma once Ryu feels prepared to confront him about his wrongdoings. As they battle, Ryu believes his abilities are failing him when he eventually spots Akuma and challenges him. He then begins to act like a raging demon as he starts to succumb to the influence of the Satsui no Hado and attacks Akuma. Then, a flower that makes him think of Fuka stops him. While Ryu claimed that his love for his master had strengthened him, Akuma contended that he had lost his drive to be strong. Then, Akuma attacked him, but Ryu could stop it with his own ki, starting to purge Akuma of his Satsui no Hado and return some of his humanity. Ryu is shown traveling the world after the film concludes. Ryu also makes a small appearance in the 1995's anime series Street Fighter II 5, also known as Street Fighter II Voyage. In this show, Ryu plays a 17-year-old traveling companion of Ken, who has not yet mastered the Hadouken as part of his original fighting repertoire. He and Ken plan to explore the globe with Chun-Li after Guile humiliates them in a bar brawl. Ryu is the one who defeats Bison in the anime's climactic battle. Bison slowly picks up more of his techniques, including the Shoryuken and the Tatsumaki, until Ryu finally dispatches him with a single Hadouken. Ryu travels from America to Japan via a ship at the conclusion of the anime. In contrast to his game counterpart, Ryu has blood relatives in the anime, including a grandfather who goes by only one name and a younger sister named Rinko, until he masters Hadouken under Dhalsim's instruction and subsequently both his Shinku Tatsumaki and his Shoryuken during the pivotal battle against Bison after Ken unleashes his own Shoryu. Several of his strikes from his fighting style are not shown in the episodes. Interesting facts you never knew about Ryu. One of the few things we know about Ryu's personality is his fear of spiders. This was caused by an incident in his childhood while he was still training with Ken. Ken played a trick on him by putting a spider in his mouth while he was asleep. Ryu awoke with a spider on his tongue and has despised spiders ever since. Ryu's aversion to spiders has been noted in the Marvel vs. Capcom games, where he frequently clashes with Spider-Man. In crossover games, Ryu is frequently picked as Capcom's ambassador. As a result, he is sparred with Tekkaman, Iron Man, the Duck Hunt Dog, Galactus, and even Pikachu. Another interesting fact about Ryu is that he becomes the new Iron Fist. Iron Fist was added to the roster of Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 when it was released. If you finish this game with Ryu, he will become the new Iron Fist. He ultimately uses an Iron Shoryuken to beat Akuma. Marvelous verdict. Ryu might not be the most powerful Street Fighter character, but he is the most popular, without a shadow of a doubt. The Street Fighter franchise's ever-stoic leader has spawned a slew of shameless lookalikes who don't measure up to him. Just look at all the fighting games after Ryu's name and likeness became synonymous with the genre. Several other post-Street Fighter II releases fashioned their primary protagonists after him, and even borrowed his red and white motif for characters that didn't look exactly like him. The roaming warrior from Street Fighter will always be known as a classic fighting game frontman. Who's your favorite Street Fighter character? Let us know in the comments below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. This has been Corey Whelan for Marvelous Videos. Have a good one, be safe out there, and thanks for watching. Hadouken!